Hello, I'm Dominic Hobson, co-founder of Future of Finance. My guest today is Dr. Thomas Dünser, Director of the Office of Financial Innovation of the Government of Liechtenstein, and a member of the Supervisory Board of the BFG Blockchain Founders Group. Liechtenstein was one of the first jurisdictions to pass a comprehensive law on tokenization. It dates back to January last year. And that act and the consequences for tokenization issuers and investors in Liechtenstein is the subject of our conversation today. Dr. Dünser, thanks very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
As I just said, Liechtenstein has had this blockchain law, the TFTG, in place since January 2020. What use has been made of it so far?
Yeah, by January the 1st, all token service providers that were active in Liechtenstein before had to comply with the law, but they had also a transition period of 12 months for registration. And up to now, I think 12 companies are now registered as TT service providers, and further companies are in the registration process. There have also been several security token issuance with a regulated prospectus in Liechtenstein in the last month, but also some tokenized funds and funds investing in tokens. But for us also the soft factors are important. So what we have also seen is a very intensive practical discussion about legal aspects of tokenization and blockchain applications. So in my perception, many companies and the startups as well as established companies have started with projects based on blockchain technology. But often the projects take rather long for several reasons, and therefore many of them are not registered yet or maybe never need a registration, in fact. But especially interesting is also the established financial intermediary sector. So for those, the regulatory certainties is utmost important. So they have waited to start with this with the projects until the TVTG or Token Act is active and is in place. So they're active in the moment too.
Now, as you say, the regulatory certainty is of considerable value, and getting this law into place early, choose your metaphor, the pioneer gets the arrows, or you have first mover advantage. But you had this opportunity to attract people in the early stages of development of the tokenization markets. Now you are next door to the European Union. You're a member of the EEA. And at the moment, the European law on tokenization, as it were, or on securities at least, is quite favorable to what you're doing, in the sense that any tokenization network has to have a central securities depository. And in other jurisdictions, including the United Kingdom, for example, and indeed Switzerland, people have kind of accepted the idea that you should have a CSD. Now, the EU is also committed to change that law over time, and sometime maybe 2024 or so, a new EU law on crypto assets will come into effect. What's the case for Liechtenstein to be acting more aggressively now over the next 3 years before the EU becomes a competing jurisdiction, to take advantage of the fact you've got this law in place, they won't have one in place until 2024?
I mean, you have to see that the Token Act is kind of a complementary regulation to financial market regulation. And financial market regulation in Liechtenstein is depending on the European financial market regulation. So the MiCA, or this European regulation of financial markets with crypto assets, is very important for us to regulate all aspects of crypto assets and also of security tokens related to financial services. So this is kind of the benefit we see there. I mean, in Liechtenstein, it's possible now to register for some roles and services, and later to have the passporting in the European Union, and you have the legal basis now and the legal certainty for handling with tokens in every kind. As well for financial services, but also for general crypto assets or other forms of tokens. And this is a good advantage to see.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you pointed out, you do have, as a member of the EEA, you do have these passporting rights. But doesn't that strengthen the case for being more aggressive now, because you can build up Liechtenstein as a major tokenization center? which could lead to very rapid growth of the marketplace in your own jurisdiction?
Yeah, as I see in the moment, I mean, to foster that case, it needs kind of a cross-border regulatory certainty, and yeah, because it's in the moment Europe is not really a harmonized market since the classification of tokens as a security or financial instruments can differ in every country. So the cross-border legal certainty in the moment is not really 100%. So the development of this market is just a bit hindered by that. And hopefully MiCA will change that in future. But with our Token Act, we also have established a kind of a role model for tokenization of securities, which many countries have been looking at in the last years. And this maybe also help to foster this development in the future. One point we also see or have seen in the last years, just the process of issuing security tokens with a prospectus, financial market prospectus has become like a standard process also in Liechtenstein. This is something that works very well, and many companies are using that. But one problem companies are facing is the lack of efficient secondary trading with financial instrument tokens. And at least the interest of professional investors still is limited. So this process, I think it needs a bit more of time until there is a harmonized market in the European Union to be, to go a step further.
Well, I'll come back to that question of secondary trading, because I think, as you say, it's an important one. But you've touched a couple of times now on the fact that security token issues are actually taking place. So what sort of assets are you seeing tokenized in Liechtenstein? You mentioned funds, for example. Do you mean mutual or alternative funds? Do you mean cryptocurrency funds? Or do you mean real estate and gold and, I don't know, lease receivables? What sort of things are you seeing tokenized, and what sort of scale is it happening?
Yeah, the first tokenization applications have, of course, been the coins, cryptocurrencies in the ICO wave. But then the next applications have been using share and bond tokens, and this process is in the moment quite well established. And under this category of security tokens, we also see companies which tokenize golds, cars, wine bottles, and so on. And this is quite interesting to see, but it's often it's still a security, or it's still kind of a financial instrument. The interesting, and you mentioned, of course, the funds tokenization, and there we see both. I mean, it's most of them are alternative funds and not mutual funds because of ease of regulation there. But the interesting thing is that first we have started with funds that are investing in tokens and cryptocurrencies. And there it was necessary to clarify the process of how the depository function of the bank is working there. It's more a process definition. But in the second stage, the tokenization of fund shares was a big topic. And this is, has been done some years ago too, and it works fine as far as I know. But the interesting feature of the Blockchain Act actually is that also it is possible to tokenize all kinds of rights, such as the property rights of a car or the usage rights. And I have talked to some projects that are planning to use that feature, but as far as I know, this has not been implemented yet. But for the volume or for the size, I'm not really the best person to ask that. So you should better ask the Financial Markets Authority or specialized lawyers for that.
Do you have any idea where the issuers are actually coming from? Are they coming from inside Liechtenstein, or are they coming from all over the world? And you make it sound as if there's quite a high concentration in the financial services industry, but is that true, or are they coming from all sorts of other industries as well? So where are they coming from geographically, and where are they coming from in terms of industries?
I mean, mainly from Switzerland and Liechtenstein, but also from the other European countries. also from countries all over the world, like Asia or the North and South America. So it's it's kind of many companies that are or investors are interested in tokenization process are coming to Liechtenstein because of this high level of legal certainty we see there. In the moment, of course, the focus is on financial services, but we see also a growing interest in non-financial applications like in industry or supply chain.
Now, one trend we're starting to hear more and more about is the fact that bank balance sheets are strained. And there is a rising expectation, I think, in the tokenization markets that banks will look to tokenize assets on their balance sheet as an alternative to selling them in the secondary market or dumping them on the central bank. Is that a trend that you're seeing emerge in Liechtenstein, banks willing to tokenize assets on their balance sheets?
Yes, this is certainly a trend that is interesting also for the banks in Liechtenstein. And because by tokenizing assets, it's possible to increase the volume of bankable assets and to offer the banking services to tokenize assets, and this is very interesting. Yes. And
talking of banks in Liechtenstein, the private banks are the dominant banking force in Liechtenstein. Are they engaged in helping to structure these issues? I think this is often the forgotten side of tokenization. Somebody has to design the issues, find the issuers, work with them, work with the lawyers to actually produce, as you mentioned earlier, the offering memorandum, the prospectus. So are the private banks in Liechtenstein involved in that work?
Basically, there are other advisors or lawyers that are focused on that topic. The majority of the banks in Liechtenstein are focusing traditionally on private banking and wealth management. But they certainly are also interested in that process just to enhance their services in that regard. But there are a few banks that are focusing on what we call transaction banking, or and have already focused in a very early stage on blockchain business, and they're very active in that sector. And others, as I see, are moving also in that direction. So it's a very interesting trend we can perceive.
The private banks, of course, have the wealthy clientele. They're servicing sort of natural as investors into this asset class as well. So you're seeing interest among some, if not all of them, from their clients, I suppose, interesting their private banks in getting engaged in investing in these assets. Do you feel the private banks are under pressure from their clients to sort of get engaged with this asset class, this new asset class?
Yes, actually, yes. The pressure is increasing because this has also to do, I think, with the price development of Bitcoin and crypto assets. That the interest of traditional clients of the private banks is increasing in all forms of tokenization. But of course, the volume of the available products is not huge. But there is a kind of increasing. The volume is increasing of interesting products, but also the interest of investors and clients is increasing. So it's an interesting development we can see at the moment there.
You mentioned the law firms. I assume that they see the blockchain law and these tokenization issues as an opportunity as well, and so they're getting up to speed with what clients want and helping advise them on issues. Is that right? Yes,
this is also a very positive development of the last years. That quite a few of our law firms are active in advising about IT law, also blockchain technology in particular. And the interesting aspect of this development is that many blockchain projects do not only need an IT lawyer, but experts from all sectors. Like if you want to have a prospectus or have a financial market application. So all experts in the legal sector are involved somehow, and working together to create new projects, and they have a good standing there.
You're using the term projects. The issues which are taking place, would you describe them as real? By which, and let me explain what I mean by that. I mean, blockchain has experienced all over the world, has had a great many proofs of concept, great many pilot studies, actually a relatively small number of actual live uses of this technology to raise capital. A lot of it's just been experiments which are much about sales and marketing as anything else. Is what you're seeing in Liechtenstein now actually the beginnings of a genuine market? You've mentioned secondary market trading as an issue, and we'll come back to that. But do you sense this is not just at the experimental stage anymore, that this is actually really starting to happen now? You're getting real issuers, real investors, and a market starting to develop on both sides.
Yeah, what you are mentioning is, of course, this phase of the rise of the ICO has brought up many marketing activities and some projects that were not really on a good fundament, as I would call it. But it's natural that I mean, we are always talking about the very early stage of projects. So also the good projects we see take a certain time until they are really in the market and active and have a kind of a volume. And I personally see about 90% of those companies that come to me are serious companies and want to create innovation and new applications in the financial market, and both startups and established companies. But it takes time, of course. It's not an easy process because you have to answer many difficult questions. If you have to consider financial market regulation or not, if you is it possible, is it not possible? And most of those questions you have to answer are detailed questions, and it's not sometimes it's a completely new question, and the state or the government is needed to just to defer if it is possible or not. And so it takes time, the serious projects to implement, and then the market needs to be ready, and this is not always the case. So just the fact that there's a long delay between the idea and the first marketing measures and the successful project is not a good point to argue if it's a good development or not. So, but it's I see very interesting projects that are going on, and also, as you mentioned, in secondary trading. But of course, it's a long development. It's longer. Most of the person are quite. I feel it has to be faster, but it takes a certain time.
I think most people would say a market is mature once it shifts from the retail to the institutional. Are you starting to see institutions get involved in this now, by which I mean asset managers, pension funds, insurance companies, or does it remain predominantly a retail market, whatever we mean by that?
Yeah, for institutional investors, it's very important that they have the legal certainty if they're investing. So the things they're used from the traditional financial markets. So and with our Token Act, we have achieved to create a similar level of legal certainty as we know from the financial markets. Some very basic things like the civil law of tokens, so that you know that you can own or possess a token, and you have those just the fundamental legal clarity for that. But the second step is just to be sure that your assets are safe in case of bankruptcy of a service provider, and they're segregated by law in the Liechtenstein Token Act. And this was just the first step to have an environment where institutional investors are willing to invest in tokens. But what we see in the moment, the secondary trading, the regulated secondary trading is very important, also for investing. So people that are investing in a professional manner are used to liquidity on the market. And as long as the secondary trading is not really solved, it's not really interesting for many institutional investors to invest or buy such products. There are some early investors, but the majority is still waiting until this market evolves.
You keep bringing up the question of secondary trading, so let's dispose of it now, as it were, because clearly, as you say, a regulated secondary trading market, trading platform, a network, whatever you want to call it, would clearly help security tokenization to take off. Yet Liechtenstein, of course, doesn't even have its own regulated stock exchange of the traditional kind. So how big a handicap is this? Do you think it would really help Liechtenstein if it actually set up a tokenization trading platform of its own? Would that help Liechtenstein to capitalize on the blockchain law and the issuing activity which is happening? And, if so, why don't you do it? Why don't you get together, you as the government or the private banks or the asset managers all get together and actually make it happen? Whose responsibility should it be? You've said repeatedly it would really help. Do you think the government should do something? Do you think the private sector should do something? What's your view?
It's a good question. I mean, first of all, the Liechtenstein financial market usually the companies that are listed on the stock exchange are using the Swiss stock exchange, and this has been sufficient up to now and has worked perfectly. But with the tokenization or blockchain technology, the traditional stock exchanges are not. It's changing. So there's an opportunity to create a new kinds of exchange and stock exchanges, also crypto asset exchanges. And there's several projects in preparation that want to be active in that sector. There are also some projects that are active already yet in this moment in Liechtenstein, just as to start for secondary trading, but only in the non-financial sector. Only if we look at non-financial instrument tokens. For the financial instrument tokens, we need to wait on the digital finance package of the European Commission. Then I expect several projects that want to start off in Liechtenstein. Mm-hmm. It is actually our attitude from the government that it's not a public task to set up an exchange. It has to be a private sector activity because it needs to be a business model. If it's not a business model, it's not something that is. It will not survive for a long time if it's not really a business model. And to provide an exchange is not easy, as we see in the international development. So it's also it will become kind of a commodity, and you need to earn money somehow, and this has to be done by trading, and this has to develop also for security tokens and tokenized financial instruments. But I expect it will be there in some years that we have some good projects. But it's not really critical if this happens in Liechtenstein, or it can also happen somewhere else, that the companies from Liechtenstein are using exchange from Germany or Switzerland or also from UK. I mean, this cooperation should be possible. And it's not a question of if it's in Liechtenstein or not.
Mm-hmm. You said something which I'm not sure I understood fully. You said we have to wait on developments in the EU with its digital law package. What were you referring to there?
The biggest challenge in the moment is this the requirement. If you are a financial instruments token, you need to require it to the financial market laws, and there it is necessary to have a central securities depository. Yes. And for blockchain projects, this does not really make sense, because the process of tokenizing a security is the same in a decentralized way as we know from this CSD process. And so the blockchain is able to replace some function of the CSD, and the need to use a CSD just makes it more complicated and unsecure and more expensive. So many projects that have started with a exchange projects, or they just realized that it's too expensive to be competitive with the existing regulation. And so the pilot regime that the EU Commission is preparing for DLTM tests, excuse me, it is called. This is a very interesting idea to have kind of an exemption for DLT projects or DLT exchanges in some manners, and this will help to create efficient tokenized security exchanges or stock exchanges.
I think you've been clear about this, but I'd like you to be absolutely clear. There's no circumstances under which the government of Liechtenstein would see it as its responsibility to develop a token exchange, or even to step into the market and bash together the heads of the private banks or the asset managers. You must get on and build this because it's a vital, important national infrastructure that we have this trading platform for tokens. It's good for the country, apart from your industry. That's just not the role you would play. It has to be a commercially viable, commercially driven project. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, issuers coming to Liechtenstein, obviously we need to set up an issuing entity. And one of the things you've had in Liechtenstein for a long time is the trust companies, which set up these legal entities. They're a long-standing feature of your marketplace. I've noticed at least one startup, Amazing Blocks, in your jurisdiction, which has kind of digitized and even tokenized that process of setting up a legal entity. How important in practice are services like that proving in this area of tokenization? Is something you've had for a long time proving useful and easy to apply to the tokenization markets or not?
Yes, that's a good question. As I see, those service providers are creating efficiency. So you mentioned this company, Amazing Blocks, that they are just supporting the tokenization of shares, for example. Mm-hmm. And if you want to tokenize your own shares or the shares of a project, there is no need to establish the know-how by yourself. It's helpful to have a professional service provider where you can press on a button and they provide you the full service of tokenizing your shares or bonds and so on, and also for other assets. And the same thing is also relevant for trust companies. So they are professionals for just founding a company and establishing structures, legal structures, and sometimes you need just help to do that, and it's more efficient if you can rely on professional partners. And this is something we also see in the lawyer sector and other service providers that are necessary also in the compliance sector. There is an ecosystem of service providers is growing with a focus on tokenization and kind of token projects, and this is a very positive development. And I think those service providers are very necessary in the future too.
Now, issuers obviously need investors. Are they tending to find those investors inside Liechtenstein with the clients of the private banks, the clients of the asset managers in Liechtenstein? Or are they coming from all over Europe or all over the world? I think you did touch on this earlier, but let's be clear about it. Where are these investors coming from, which the issuers want to reach?
There are two types of investors in the moment. I see one type of investor is just part of this token community, and they just look worldwide on the good opportunities to invest, and so this is worldwide, and so worldwide investors also come to Liechtenstein. The second part of the community is coming from traditional sector and asset managers or funds that are wanting to invest in such opportunities. But the large part, of course, is the worldwide blockchain community.
Okay, so people who've been investing in cryptocurrencies find it easier to invest in this new security token asset class as well.
Yes.
And as you look at Liechtenstein itself, are the clients of the asset managers or the clients of the private banks proving more enthusiastic? Is there any evidence that asset management clients are keener than private banking clients or not?
I'm not really too much in the actual developments, but just my subjective view is that there is an increasing interest in investing in such opportunities, also from the traditional clients, and this is also interesting because it can, if you can provide the legal certainty there for investors, this is also a really interesting business case.
Now we've talked a lot about what's happening, and it's the positive side of the story. But are there obstacles to development of this market apart from the secondary trading issue? Are there you've got the law in place, you've got investors, you've got issuers, but are there also, as there are in every market, sort of legacy systems as a problem? Often inside institutions, financial institutions, there are legacy attitudes, you might call them, a kind of natural conservatism, a fear of getting involved in something which might be riskier than something they're used to. Do you have obstacles of that kind, or are there sort of pioneers in the vanguard of this and then almost opponents of it, or a kind of inertia exerted by people who are in the rear guard of the development? So what are the obstacles to making this market grow inside your own jurisdiction?
Yeah, I mean, our Token Act is intended to cover all kinds of applications of tokens, so from cryptocurrency, security tokens, financial instruments, up to the real world assets and the token economy as a whole. And we have to realize that every field of application needs developed by itself. So and for that it's first necessary to have the legal certainty, and then both products and investors and applications have to develop. So and the modern financial sector has developed over a period of several decades. So it's not an instantaneous development that has happened. So we have to see this if you look at the security token developments. I mean, in some years we will have full legal certainty and clarity what is possible and what is not possible, and so the trust of investors is there to have both the applications, the products, and also the investors and the clients, and this will develop in some years in a very good way. If you look at the sector, for example, in the future, if you want to tokenize property or real estate, and I want to, if I need a smart contract, for example, to rent my apartments, if I want to go on holidays using blockchain, there we need another level of legal certainty, so that I'm sure if I buy the right to use an apartment for 2 weeks in my vacations, it's legally possible in both countries, and in all countries we want to use that. And this is another level of legal certainty we have to create in a cross-border manner throughout the world, or at least in Europe, so that this can happen. So with every application, this is what I want to say. It's necessary to see the obstacles in particular, and to just to clarify that. And this will take some years until decades to unleash the potential of the token economy in total.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I like that phrase, unleashing the potential of the tokenization economy. As you were speaking there, I was thinking about how Airbnb is going to develop in line with the tokenization markets. Now, one final question for you is prompted by that thought. If we look back on this conversation in 5 or 7 years' time, in 2026 or 2030, whatever it is, what would you expect, or maybe expect isn't the right word, what would you prefer to see have happened in the Liechtenstein tokenization market? What do you think it'll look like in 5, 7, 10 years' time?
Yeah, I personally believe that the token technology will just be in every application of our economy, and not only in financial sector, but also in real world applications like in industry or in services. And so I hope and I expect that we will see in Liechtenstein all forms of applications of of tokens in the economy. So that's the legal certainty of the digital economy. That is for us the focus of also of our law. It has increased in a good manner, and so this development has taken place. And of course, as well as in the financial sector and also in the real economy. But yeah, this is my vision. I expect that too. That this is that we see the broad applications of blockchain and token technology in Liechtenstein, and hopefully also throughout the world. And in Europe, that we have a harmonized tokenized token market or token economy that is helping to support economic growth.
Well, Dr. Dünser, I look forward very much to having that conversation before the end of the decade and check out our expectations against what actually happened. But thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome.